Our YouTube page will be a primary spot where we will archive this. I see a call-in user via the phone. I can't see a name on that. Welcome, glad you're with us. Again, if you're just joining us, we are taking questions throughout the night via the chat function of this WebEx presentation, and at the bottom of your screen, moving your cursor, you'll see that chat function. So I want to encourage you to use that at your leisure as things pop up in your head. We'll interrupt Randy from time to time, and as relevant, we'll get him to answer those questions. And we are just a minute after 7. Maybe we'll stall just an extra minute more, and then we'll let Randy go for it. Well, your time is appreciated and valuable, so we want to try and hold to our schedule as much as possible. Normally, this is about the time, if you were in our stores, we would be doing this in-house, and I'd be directing you to the restroom and a variety of housekeeping things, but this is a different story this year. Yeah, it's different, but feel free to come in and out as you feel comfortable, for sure. Randy, 30 seconds or so. Should we get you launched here?
Yeah, let's do that.
Well, while Randy's setting up the presentation, I just want to begin by thanking everybody for joining us tonight. Again, my name is Tony, if I didn't already mention that. But as the retail operations manager, it's just a privilege to have you join us tonight. Again, this is a unique, a unique time, a unique opportunity for us to connect in unique ways. And Randy is our BioGuard rep. He has been doing this for many, many years, and we're trying something new tonight. If there's glitches, we'll get through them as they arise, but nonetheless, it'll be very informative. Please, again, use the chat function as you might have questions. We'll get those answered, but welcome. Thanks for joining us. Randy, it's you. I'm turning it over to you now. Go ahead.
All right, sounds good. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. And like Tony said, we usually do this live every year. We typically do 2 of these classes every year, one in the spring to help pool owners get their pools started up for the season, and then also in the fall for winterizing. And so we really appreciate you coming out. I know it's a challenging time right now, and we wanted to at least offer this since we can't invite people into the stores for a big group of people. We thought we'd do this online, so hopefully you'll pick up something from this. So with that, I'm going to get started and move on to my next slide. And the first slide that I've got is really why to shop at the Pool and Spa House and the BioGuard products. Is we've been partnered with the Pool and Spa House for over 30 years, and they've got 4 stores in the Portland, Vancouver area, and train their people extremely well. So you've got a good partner there. We've been selling pool and spa products since 1963. And if any of you have ever brought a water sample into the store, we do have a state-of-the-art water testing, water analysis program to help you guys keep your pool looking good for the year. Obviously, there's just a couple types of pools we'll talk about, and we maintain the water pretty much the same in any pool, whether you have an above ground pool, an in-ground pool, residential, commercial pool. It doesn't really matter. We treat them all the same. I know we had a couple of commercial pool operators signed up for the class tonight, so I'll talk a little bit some of the differences in commercial pools, but pretty simple. We treat them all the same, whether it's residential or commercial. And looks like, hang on a sec, look like one of my slides. There we go. I actually skipped ahead a couple of slides. Is really the main objective for tonight is to make sure that your pool is ready to be swam in this summer, make those memories, not have any algae or cloudy water problems. I mean, that's really our whole goal. We want to make sure your pool is ready whenever you want to use it. The things that we're going to cover tonight, we'll talk, I already kind of covered why the pool and spa house and BioGuard, but we'll dig into the pool anatomy, what we call the 5 keys to pool care, and then we'll get into, I almost hate to call it water chemistry, but water balance and the different pool care systems that you might be using. I talked about that, the different types of pools we covered, how a pool works. So if any of you are relatively new pool owners, this is kind of important to understand how the pool actually operates. And you've got a body of water, and whether you have an in-ground or above-ground pool, everybody's going to have a pump. Let me get my little highlighter out here. And where's my little highlighter here? Here's my little laser pointer. So everybody's going to have a pump. Everybody's going to have a filter. Some of you may have a heater. You may have some type of an automatic chlorinating device or a chlorine generator, a salt system. But the way the water flows in all pools is really exactly the same. Everybody's going to typically have a skimmer. If you have an in-ground pool, you're going to have a main drain down at the bottom of the pool. Those two components are what we call the suction side of the system, where the water is drawn from the pool back to the pump. And so it's drawn from the skimmer, the main drain, back to the pump. It's then pushed out of the pump into the filter where it's cleaned, into the heater if you have one, to your sanitizing device, and then back to the pool. It's basically a big circle. A couple of things from this slide that are important. The skimmer, we want to make sure the water level is halfway up the skimmer. That's the proper level. And the little gate that's inside there, if you have the type of skimmer that's got a skimmer weir gate, we want to make sure that that skimmer weir gate is in position. It's flopping kind of up and down, because that's what gives the skimming action that draws the dirt and debris into the skimmer. We also want to keep that skimmer basket clean, because that's basically a pre-filter. So depending on how much debris gets into your pool, as needed, keep that skimmer basket clean. That's, like I said, basically a pre-filter. The other pre-filter that we have is on the front of the pump. That's called the hair and lint pot. We want to keep that clean as well. Let me see if I can, bear with me just a second here. There we go. Is the hair and lint pot on the front of the pump, we want to make sure that's kept clean, because that's another pre-filter before the water gets into the filter. So again, the water's in a big circle. The other thing from this slide, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, where the return lines, where that water comes back into the pool, we want to make sure that those return lines are pointed down at about a 45-degree angle to ensure the water is being directed more towards the bottom of the pool. This ensures that we have great circulation, because this is really important to how well the water care products that we're going to be putting into the pool will actually work. All right, let's move on to the next one. So the things that we're going to cover tonight, we're going to go over what we call the 5 keys to pool care, and some of these we'll go through pretty quickly. But when we look at how we need to maintain a pool, all 5 of these components are important. That we've got good circulation, good filtration. There's a few little cleaning practices that we need to maintain, testing the water periodically, and then obviously proper water chemistry. So the first key is circulation. And basically this is all fueled by, you see the picture at the bottom left, that's the pump. That's really the heart of your pool system. That's what either sucks the water from the main drain in the skimmer, pushes it back through the filter, makes sure that water is circulating, being filtered, any of the chemicals are being distributed. The picture in the bottom right, that's the skimmer, that's the proper level. So if you're just getting your pools up and running for the summer, make sure it's about halfway up the skimmer. Make sure that the skimmer weir gate is in proper position. And you'll see in my next slide, this talks about how many hours a day we want to run the pump. Those of you that are commercial pool operators, you're required to run the pump 24 hours a day. In residential pools, we recommend 24 hours a day, but you obviously can run the pump as much as you like. We recommend a minimum of 10 to 12 hours a day. Again, that ensures that the water is being filtered, cleaned, the chemicals are being distributed properly. And without getting too technical, what this slide's talking about in the bottom left-hand side, it talks about how quickly the water turns over. Most pools, when they're built, they're designed to have what we call a 6 to 8 hour turnover rate. So if you've got a 20,000 gallon pool, the equipment has been sized so you can circulate 20,000 gallons of water through the pump, the filter, the heater if you have one, typically in 8 hours or less. And in one turnover, only 42% of the water is filtered. 58% is unfiltered because we can't get every single drop of water through the system in just one turnover. In two turnovers, 84% of the water is filtered. In three, 95%, and four, 98%. That's why you commercial operators, the health department requires you run the pump 24 hours a day so that you get almost 100% of the water through the system every day. So this is important, but a minimum of 10 to 12 hours a day. And anytime you have any kind of a water quality issue like cloudy water, algae, anything like that, we want to make sure the pump is running 24 hours a day until we solve that problem. And then down in the right-hand corner of the slide, you see the position of the return jets. If you have return jets like the one you see in the picture there that has a directional eyeball fitting, you want that slightly tilted down at about a 45-degree angle. So we're kind of driving the water down towards the bottom of the pool to get good circulation. This is pretty important. The second thing is good filtration. Looks like I might have make sure I didn't skip a slide here. Okay, is having good filtration. And these are the three types of filters that you all will have, either a sand filter, which is the bottom left, a cartridge filter in the middle, a diatomaceous earth filter on the right. Again, the whole idea behind these is to ensure that the water is being filtered properly, chemicals are being distributed properly. So there is a little bit of maintenance involved with these filters, that they periodically either need to be backwashed. So if you've got a sand filter, one of the common maintenance practices is when the pressure gauge on that sand filter goes up about 8 to 10 pounds above the clean pressure, that means there's too much dirt and debris in the filter and it's time to backwash it. And as you can kind of see in my slide here, let me get my highlighter here. So in a sand filter, the water comes in from the top. So this little diffuser here, the water spills over that. And normally you'd have about 3/4 of the way this sand filter filled with sand. And as the water flows down, the dirt and debris collects in the sand. The clean water goes down to these little tubes at the bottom. These are called laterals. These have little slots in them that allow the water through, but not the sand. And then the water goes back to the pool. When you get enough dirt and debris in that sand filter that's starting to kind of clog up the filter, the pressure gauge will go up. And that's when you backwash the filter, and that reverses the flow of the water. The water comes out these little laterals, kind of churns up the sand, and the dirt and debris goes out your backwash hose. That's how you properly clean, or how you properly backwash a filter. The cartridge filters and the DE filters, if you have one, these just actually need to be physically removed and rinsed off periodically. And we do recommend chemically cleaning these filters twice a season. Usually we'll use, let me see if I can get to my slide here. We'll use a product called Strip Quick. This is our primary product in the Northwest because of the type of water that we have, where we'll actually chemically clean those filters twice a season. Usually what we recommend is in the middle of the season, like July, or when you close up the pool in the fall, those are the two best times to chemically clean the filter. And so again, Strip Quick is the primary product. If you live in an area where maybe the water's a little bit hard, where you've got a lot of mineral content, then we use the other cleaner called Clean It. But this should be done twice a year. The other thing on this slide that can be really helpful is the little sock that you see on the skimmer there. That's called a skim more. If you tend to get a lot of fine debris into the pool, um, you would this would help filter out that fine debris so that it doesn't go through the skimmer basket and get into your pump pot or the filter. This acts as a good pre-filter. Plus, if your pool gets a lot of usage, this also has a component in it called Miselex that pulls out body oils and suntan lotions. So you tend to not get as much of that type of debris built up in the filter either. So this can be really helpful, especially if you get like pine needles or little debris into the pool. This will help filter that stuff out. The packet comes with 5 of them. You want to, typically they last about a month. So every month you want to replace that and clean it dump the skimmer basket out as needed, because this is obviously going to pull out a lot more debris than not having a skimmer sock on there. And you want to definitely keep that skimmer basket clean and check that, at least once a week. The other thing, sometimes people will ask, what can we use to help the water just be better, clearer? And this is a product that we came out with about 3-4 years ago. It's called Pool Complete. And this is really, if any of you've ever used like a water clarifier, this is kind of like a water clarifier on steroids, you might say. Keeps the water extra clear. This is just a weekly maintenance. You don't have to add this product. This is not kind of part of, the basics of pool care. But if you want to have extra clear water and also want to help prevent waterline buildup and prevent phosphate buildups in the pool, this is a once a week maintenance product that will really help keep the water extra clear. All right, so really the next area, and this is probably the least fun of owning a pool or operating a pool, but a pretty important part, this is the cleaning part. And you'll see at the top of my slide there, it talks about perform regularly, vacuuming, brushing, skimming, chemically cleaning. Really the first 3, vacuuming, brushing, and skimming, these are pretty much just as needed. At least the vacuuming and skimming part. If you see debris on the bottom of the pool, vacuum it up. If you've got debris floating on the surface, get your skimmer net out. We do recommend brushing the pool once a week. Get your trusty nylon brush out, brush the walls, the bottom of the pool. That ensures that we're getting any debris, algae, biofilms off the walls into the water where the chemicals can react with it or the filter can pull it out. So again, brushing once a week, skimming and vacuuming is needed. The 2 products that you see here, these are the off the wall is a water line cleaner. So if you get any kind of a mineral deposit around the water line, a kind of maybe a little bit of a scum line, you put this on a brush or a sponge, this will you use to chemically clean the water line. And then if you've got a winter cover that you're getting ready to take off to put away for the summer, there's products like Stowaway that will protect the cover over the summer. And then when you put your solar blanket away in the fall, or in the spring, in the fall, is that you would want to chemically clean it with Stowaway as well. And if you want to make life even easier, there are devices that actually vacuum and brush the pool for you. These are called robotic cleaners. This is the one that the Pool and Spa House typically recommends. It's called the Dolphin. And there's one for above ground pools, in-ground pools, lots of different options, but these work awesome to help brush and vacuum the pool and take some of the weekly maintenance out of things. So kind of a quick recap on what we covered so far. Want to make sure that we've got good circulation. The pump needs to run a minimum of 10 to 12 hours a day, ideally 24 hours a day. Want to make sure that that water's getting moved around. Keep the angle of the returns at a 45-degree angle pointed down. That will help circulation and filtration. Also, it's kind of funny, actually, swimmers help the circulation. The more people that are in the pool stirring that water up also help the circulation as well. And then clean regularly. Pay attention to the corners of the pools. If you've got any recessed steps, brush the steps. We want to make sure that we don't have any dead spots in the pool. That's kind of the main key, is we want to make sure that we're keeping that water stirred up so that it's getting filtered, clean. The chemicals are getting into every, you might say, nook and cranny of the pool. Again, if you have any questions, just type them into the chat box. Tony will let me know if you've got any questions, and I'll address them as we go through. All right, so we covered circulation, filtration, cleaning. The next step is good testing practices. And so the question that it asks here, what's a good water sample? And so when you take a water sample, whether you're going to test it yourself or you're going to bring a water sample into the pool and spa house and have them run it through the computer analysis, is you want to go down in the water about 18 inches or elbow depth to get the water sample, not right at the surface. Also, not away from the return lines where that water is coming back into the pool. That could have higher levels of sanitizer in it. So we want to take the water sample away from the return lines. We definitely recommend bringing a water sample into the pool and spa house once a month. They do, if you haven't done this before, it's a free service. They do computerized water testing, and they test a whole host of things, from the chlorine levels, pH, total alkalinity, calcium hardness, metals in the water, phosphates, a whole host of things. So we definitely recommend once a month. And then the testing that you're going to be doing, now it depends on if you're a commercial pool operator or you just got a backyard pool. The commercial pool operators, they're required to test the chlorine and the pH levels every 4 hours, every day that the pool is open. Usually in residential pools, once or twice a week is adequate. And really the two key tests that you're going to be performing at home are the chlorine, if you're using chlorine or whatever sanitizer of choice, the sanitizer test, and the pH test. Those are the main tests that we want to keep an eye on. Those basically tell us if the water is safe to get in. All right, so now we're going to dig into really the water chemistry, and it's kind of divided into two areas: the water balance and the different pool care systems that we use. So no matter what pool care system, if you use chlorine or if you use a non-chlorine system like soft soak or soft swim, or have a salt system, everybody needs to maintain good water balance. This controls the comfort of the water, how long your pool and the equipment are going to last, the water clarity, and how well your sanitizer works. So really it controls everything. And what water balance consists of is really three main components: the pH, total alkalinity, and calcium hardness. We're going to cover each one of these pretty briefly. And then there's two other things that they'll test for at the pool and spa house: the total dissolved solids, that's what the TDS is. And all of this kind of, you might say, comes under what we call the saturation index. That's the overall water balance. So when they run a water test at the store, what they're shooting for is they want to get a perfect, what's called saturation index. That's 0. That means the water is not corrosive or scale forming. So if you ever wonder what that number is on your water test, that's telling you the overall condition of the water balance. So these are the general ranges that we're shooting for. The most important, I kind of highlighted this, is the pH. The recommended range is 7.4 to 7.6. If any of you remember from school, this basically tells us if the water is either acidic or basic. And we want the pool water slightly to the basic side of the scale, between 7.4 and 7.6. That's the sweet spot. The other couple of water balancing parameters that we check as well is total alkalinity. Those are the general ranges for total alkalinity. And we also check calcium hardness. It's kind of funny. We actually want to have relatively hard water in swimming pools. So those are the three main water balancing factors that we'll check. One of the questions that people ask quite often is, why does my pH change? I get it, perfectly balanced. The pH is at 7.5. A few days later, it's either gone too high or too low. And the reason for that is really everything can affect the pH. Things like rain, the different chemicals that we put in the pool, if you get a case of algae, swimmer waste, really anything that can get into the water can affect the pH. Rain, if we get a dust storm and we get a lot of debris put into the pool, that will affect the pH. And so that's why we have to test the pH every day in a commercial pool or at least a couple times a week in a residential pool. Now, one of the ways that we can help minimize that impact of the pH fluctuating is by maintaining another water balancing parameter called total alkalinity. You've probably tested this yourself, or if you've ever brought a water sample into the pool and spa house, this is actually really the first thing that we balance when we're getting a pool up and running for the spring. And we want the total alkalinity typically between 125 and 150 parts per million. And what it does, this is like the shock absorber for the pH, is this helps protect the pH. Once we get the pH in the proper range and the total alkalinity in the proper range, the total alkalinity, as you can kind of see from the slide, it protects the pH so it doesn't fluctuate as much. So especially in the Northwest and typically in Western Washington, Western Oregon, the water doesn't have a lot of mineral content in it. And so the total alkalinity is typically very low. That tends to cause what we call pH bounce, where the pH tends to fluctuate a lot. Once you get the total alkalinity in balance, your pH will stay a heck of a lot more stable. So we definitely recommend getting that tested at the beginning of the season and getting it in balance. And it's pretty easy to do this. The products that we use to balance both pH and total alkalinity are on this page. If you ever need to raise the pH, we add a product called Balance Pack 200. If you ever need to lower the pH, we add Low and Slow. If you ever need to raise the total alkalinity, which is pretty common, we use a product called Balance Pack 100. All of these products get added directly to the pool with the pump and filter operating. All we need to do is allow about 15 minutes to a half an hour between chemical additions and people can get in the pool and swim. Pretty simple to make these adjustments. Use your test kit or test strips. It'll guide you on how much of each of these products to add depending on what levels you're trying to achieve, but it's very easy to make these water balancing adjustments for pH and total alkalinity. Then really the last water balancing factor is calcium hardness. And like I mentioned earlier, we want to have relatively hard water in swimming pools. Is if it's too low, which is typically the case in most of Western Oregon, Western Washington, that tends to deteriorate the plaster, can cause corrosion to metal surfaces. The water is just more aggressive. If the calcium hardness is too high, then we tend to get cloudy water and scale formation. So the pictures on this slide, the one on the left is really from low calcium hardness where they're getting etching of the plaster. The one on the right is just a cloudy pool, and that was partially caused by the calcium being too high. So when you come into the store, they'll test your calcium hardness, and depending on where your calcium hardness is, typically it's low in Western Oregon, Western Washington. So we'll add a product called Balance Pack 300 that will increase the hardness. If it ever, for some reason, happened to be too high, there is a product called Scale Inhibitor that we put in. There is not really a chemical that removes calcium from the water. If your calcium, for whatever reason, has gotten too high, or maybe that's just you live in an area that's got hard water, Scale Inhibitor will prevent that calcium from coming out of solution and scaling. The picture that you see in the middle of the page there, that's a cartridge filter. The one on the left is all caked up with scale. That was from high calcium hardness and high pH. The one on the right is the way it should look. The beauty of calcium hardness is once we get this in balance, this does not fluctuate very much. Calcium stays in the water. It only goes away by dilution. So if you're having this checked once a month, that should be more than adequate to keep the calcium hardness in the proper range. All right, so that was kind of a quick run through of water balance. One of the things that I mentioned was cloudy water. When the calcium gets too high, cloudy water is probably one of the most common water quality issues that we see in swimming pools. And there's a variety of things that cause the water to be cloudy. It could be low sanitizer levels, high calcium hardness levels, high pH, but sometimes you may just get a little bit of particulate matter in the water. That's where water clarifiers can help out. So I'm guessing some of you keep a water clarifier on hand, like Polishine Blue or Natural Clarifier. Basically, what these water clarifying agents do is they take really fine particles that are so fine that they pass through your filter. It makes them larger so the filter can pull them out. It's really pretty simple technology. Takes fine stuff, makes it larger, then the filter can pull them out. So some people will add these on a weekly basis to help keep the water extra clear. There's also, if maybe your water's gotten a little bit cloudier than just a little hazy where we can't see the bottom of the pool, we will sometimes recommend a product called Pool Tonic. This is kind of a heavy duty water clarifier that speeds up, helps the filter pull particulate out much faster. So if you come into the store and they test your water and you have high phosphate levels, they may recommend this product to help speed the process of getting your pool cleared up. This will remove all kinds of contaminants, from pollutants to pollen, all kinds of different debris. If you do have dogs that you let in the pool, that's perfectly fine, but just be aware one dog is equal to 50 people as far as the amount of contaminants that it puts into the pool. So you may need to use Pool Tonic periodically if you let your dogs in the pool. This will just help pull that material out of the pool. All right. So we kind of covered, really, we've touched on the last key, the water chemistry, but we talked about good circulation, filtration, cleaning, testing, and water balance. And it's really important that we're maintaining all 5 of those. Now we're going to dig into really the pool care programs here in just a second. And those of you that haven't opened your pool up yet, this is a product called Pool Opening Complete that speeds the process. Once you get your pool opened, you get it properly balanced. This will speed the process of cleaning up any waterline debris from over the winter and helps clear the water quickly. So when you come into the store, they run a computer analysis for your spring opening. This will be a product that will get recommended to speed up the clarifying action for opening your pool. All right. So the next area that we're going to cover is the different pool care systems that you can use. And whether it's just traditional chlorine, or you have a salt water system, or you're using soft swim, these are basically the 3 main programs that are used in swimming pools. The key here is they all have really the same 3 components, that we've got to have something in the water to sanitize. That's, if you're using chlorine, that's what chlorine does. Or if you've got a salt water system, that will produce a sanitizer to kill bacteria. That keeps the water safe so we don't get little skin rashes and ear infections and things like that. The second key is oxidizing. That's what keeps the water crystal clear. You might have heard this called shocking the pool. Same thing. That keeps the water crystal clear. And then the third key is preventing algae. There's some types of algae that are resistant to chlorine and other sanitizers. So we need to keep some type of an algicide in the water to prevent algae from ever occurring. But kind of keep that in mind as whatever system you're on, if you're on traditional chlorine or if you've got a salt water pool or soft swim, those are the 3 main components. And the first step, so we're going to talk about the traditional chlorine system first, is keeping chlorine in the water. This will kill bacteria, a lot of different types of algae, prevent swimmers from disease transmission. So things like little skin rashes and respiratory infections, that type of thing. This helps keep the water clean and clear. And those of you that use chlorine, it's pretty simple. We don't need to keep very much chlorine in the water. That 1 to 4 parts per million is the recommended range. Even in commercial pools, typically the commercial pools, we want to maintain 3 to 5 parts per million. But that's still pretty low levels. If you think about it, that's 1 to 4 parts per million of chlorine to every million parts of water. So very low levels of chlorine does it take to kill bacteria. And that's the level that we're always shooting for. So when you go out to test your pool, if the chlorine is between 1 and 4 parts per million, that's the level that we're always shooting for. So when you go out to test your pool, if the chlorine is between 1 and 4 parts per million, that's the level that we're always shooting for. So when you go out to test your pool, if the chlorine is between 1 and 4 parts per million, that's the level that we're always shooting for. So when you go out to test your pool, if the chlorine is between 1 and 4 parts per million, that's the level that we're always shooting for. So when you go out to test your pool, if the chlorine is between 1 and 4 parts per million, that's the level that we're always shooting for. So when you go out to test your pool, if the chlorine is between 1 and 4 parts per million, that's the level that we're always shooting for. So when you go out to test your pool, if the chlorine is between 1 and 4 parts per million, that's the level that we're always shooting for. So when you go out to test your pool, if the chlorine is between 1 and 4 parts per You don't need to do anything. That's perfect. Now, we do want to compensate a little bit for bather load. If you know that you're going to have a party this weekend and you've got a bunch of kids coming over, a bunch of adults, it's better to keep the chlorine a little bit to the higher side of the scale, between, say, 3 and 4 parts per million, to help. You might say there's more chlorine in the bank, because if you get 8 or 10 kids in the pool and you've only got 1 part per million of chlorine in the water, that's going to dissipate pretty quickly, and then now you're out of chlorine, and the people in the water may not be protected. So it's real important. That's kind of one of those tests that if you go out, you check the chlorine level and it's below 1, nobody gets in the pool until we fix that. And so there's a number of different types of chlorine that you can use. You can use chlorine tablets, sticks, there's granular chlorine. Probably the most common way to get chlorine into a pool is either by a tablet or a stick that's put into a floating feeder, automatic feeder, even in the skimmer, where this product is dissolved slowly, put directly into the pool to maintain a sanitizer level. And so, like I said, most people will use a stick or a tablet. The average rule of thumb is these sticks or tablets weigh 8 ounces. The average pool needs 2 sticks or 2 tablets per 10,000 gallons of pool water per week. So if you've got a 20,000 gallon pool, it's pretty common that you should be dissolving about 3 or 4 tablets a week to maintain that 1 to 4 parts per million of chlorine. Now, you commercial operators, you might use a little bit more than that because you're typically getting a little bit higher bather load than a residential pool, but still kind of the same principle. The slide that you see here, one of the things that we did a few years ago is we added some additional ingredients to our chlorine tablets and sticks to give them a little bit more of a benefit than just killing bacteria. So all of our Algae Complete products contain, the first product is called Guard, that makes the water feel soft and silky after about 2 or 3 weeks of dissolving into the water. It also contains an ingredient that helps protect the equipment from scale and scaling and corrosion. And then it also contains what's called Guard technology that makes the product dissolve a little bit slower. And especially if you do feed chlorine tablets or sticks through the skimmer and you don't run your pump 24 hours a day, one of the beauties of this product is when you turn the pump off, they almost stop dissolving. They form a little film over them and they stop dissolving to the point where you're not going to get that high buildup of chlorine in the skimmer, and they save themselves for the next day.
Randy, question is one brought up: do pool chemicals expire?
So really the only thing that expires are the testing reagents. If you use a test kit, the little bottle reagents, those have typically a 1-year shelf life. The test strips, they have an expiration date, so you'd want to check the expiration date on your test strips. Really the chemicals that we're using, the only thing that's a little bit sensitive are the liquid products. We don't want to leave those outside where they could freeze, thaw. They're not very freeze thaw stable. So any liquid products, if you can keep those in a safe place, maybe in the garage. But really, I don't recommend buying more than a season's worth of chemicals and saving them for a couple years, because some of the powder products can harden up a little bit. So, but as far as expiration, as long as you keep the lids on them, they're going to be good for years. Good question. All right, so we talked about keeping the pool sanitized. The next step that you've probably all heard of is shocking the pool. This is step 2. And the reason that step 2 is important is this helps remove contaminants from the water. If you think about chlorine, we're maintaining a pretty low level, and that basically kills bacteria. We still get some contaminants in the water that need to be removed. They're not harmful bacteria or anything, but it's like when you burn trash. You've got a little bit of ash left. Shocking the pool is kind of like sweeping up the ash, and helps the filter pull it out or gases it off. This is really the step that keeps the pool crystal clear. We recommend shocking a pool once a week when the pool's being used during the summer, especially when we get into late June, July, August, it's warm, the pool's being used. This is the step that keeps the water crystal clear. It helps prevent problems before they start. And people get a little bit confused with this process sometimes because we're kind of doing the same thing with similar products. We talked about keeping chlorine levels of 1 to 4 parts per million in the water. That's what we call sanitization. That's keeping the water sanitized. Versus oxidation, which is the process of chemically changing a component and making it easier to remove. That's what shocking does. And all pools require both. We have to have continuous sanitization, which is our chlorine, and routine oxidation. And we recommend shocking a pool once a week. There's a number of different shock products at the pool and spa house. This is typically the one that we recommend for weekly maintenance. This is called Smart Shock, and this will clarify the water. It shocks the pool, removes contaminants. It also has a pH buffer. It has some little algae killing crystals that help give a little bit extra support to preventing algae. And one of the other beauties is that you can swim 15 minutes typically after you use this product. Some of the other products that we've got in the store, you pretty much have to shock at night, and you may have the pool down for anywhere from 8 to 24 hours because the chlorine level gets too high. This one you can typically shock and swim 15 minutes later. So the treatment is 1 pound. It comes in a 1 pound bag, 2 pound bottle, 25 pound bucket, but it's 1 pound per 12,000 gallons of pool water once a week. A lot of people will do this on Sundays after the pool's had heavy usage. When you add this product to the pool, you want the pump and filter operating. You want to keep the cover off. If you've got either a solar blanket or an automatic cover, we want to keep the cover off for about 6 to 8 hours. What happens is when you shock a pool, there's actually a chemical process that takes place that causes these contaminants to gas off. And we want to make sure that they are gassing off into the atmosphere. If we leave the cover on, they won't have a chance to escape, and we may not have full oxidation of the contaminants in the water. So once a week, shock the pool. And then really the last step is preventing algae. This is step 3. And the reason we want to prevent algae, obviously we don't want the pool to turn green, but algae is constantly getting into the pool. It's microscopic plant life. It's being carried in by rain, wind, any runoff. And so we want to routinely add a preventative algicide so it doesn't ever become a problem. So if you come into the pool and spa house and say, I need an algicide, they're going to ask you, do you need it to kill it or do you want it to prevent it? Because the whole goal is we want to prevent algae from ever occurring. And with algicides, if you're going to use it to prevent algae, there's basically 2 doses. There's an initial dose that we put in that kind of puts in, you might say, a bank of algicide into the water. And then there's a weekly maintenance dose that we put in to kind of help keep the algicide level up so that we don't get the green pool. And there's really 3 types of algae: green algae, mustard algae, which is kind of a brownish yellow algae that tends to lay on the bottom of the pool or on the steps. And then there's black algae. This is like little black slimy spots this especially occurs in plaster pools. And so that's what we're trying to prevent from occurring. And typically we've got a number of different types of preventative algicides in the store. This is the one that we'll typically recommend. It's called Algae Complete. This is a dual action algicide that we've had out for a few years that will prevent all types of algae, green, black, and mustard. It won't foam. So if you've got any kind of a water feature, fountain, attached hot tub, this product will not foam. It's suitable for all pool sizes and all types. This is the 3rd step in preventing algae. If you want to add a little bit extra to your pool to give it a little bit extra water quality, there's a couple of things. I talked about this one earlier. Pool Complete can be added weekly. This will keep the water extra clear, prevents waterline buildup, and helps keep the phosphate levels removed. So the way we kind of state the way the water looks with this product is it's really, your clarity is like a pool in high definition. The water is that clear. And then if you've got, oops, skipped a slide here. Then especially if you've got some kids that like to swim underneath the water with their eyes open, this is another again, you don't have to put this product in. This is just a product that makes the water better. This, if you've got kids that like to swim underneath the water with their eyes open and their eyes tend to burn a little bit, this makes the water very soft on the eyes. The product that's in this bucket called Optimizer, they use it in like Visine and get the red out. So it's very soft on the eyes. It also helps make water balance a little bit easier to control. There's a visible difference. So if you want to really take the water quality to the next level, I definitely recommend putting Optimizer in. And the beauty of this is it doesn't get consumed. Once you put it in, you do have to put a fair amount of it in, but it doesn't get used up. It stays in the water. The only way it goes away is by dilution. All right. I don't know if any of you have a salt water pool. These have been pretty popular really about the last 10 or 15 years. You might have heard of these. And basically what it is, the concept behind it, you add salt to the pool, and then the salt water passes through a chlorine generator. These pictures that you see, these are three different basically models of chlorine generators. As the water passes through that cell, it takes salt water and converts it into chlorine. The chlorine kills bacteria, some algae. It converts back to salt. That's why they call it a chlorine generator, because it kind of keeps regenerating itself and producing more chlorine. It basically takes the place of putting, chlorine tablets or sticks in the skimmer in a feeder. And it does tend to make the water feel a little bit softer and silkier as well. The salt cells use electricity to produce the chlorine. The sanitizer, just like a chlorine tablet or stick, destroys contaminants in the water. You may not need to shock quite as often with this system either, but primarily it replaces the chlorine tablets or sticks. You still do need to maintain water balance, however. It doesn't take control of the water balance, still need to maintain proper water balance. So you've got a couple of different ways to do that. We have some products specifically designed for salt pools. The first one's called Saltscapes. So when you come into the store, if you've got a salt pool, number one, make sure you tell the staff that you've got a salt pool. They'll direct you to really two different choices, either the Saltscapes product line or Mineral Springs, that are designed specifically for saltwater pools. We do things a little bit differently in saltwater pools. So these are all designed strictly for saltwater pools. And then there's also another option called Mineral Springs for saltwater pools. It's a little bit easier to use and a little bit more convenient. There's basically just one product that's added on a weekly basis. These are the three Mineral Springs products, but the main one that's used on a weekly basis is called Renewal. You just add a bag of this per 20,000 gallons once a week, and that will help keep the pH in balance, keep the salt level in the proper range. At the other two products, the Beginnings and the Stain and Scale, these are really just added at the beginning of the season if needed. So again, I would recommend chatting with the staff at the pool and spa house a bit about which is the best way to go for you if you've got a saltwater pool. Just a couple of things on, you have a question, Tony?
Well, we do have a couple of questions piling up, but maybe when you're finished with your salt piece here, we'll get into those.
Sounds good. So the way to get the most out of a salt pool, a couple things here. Make sure that you're balancing the pool water and protecting the equipment. One of the tendencies with a salt pool is the pH tends to run to the high side. So it's real important you're checking the pH periodically to make sure that it doesn't get too high. You may need to occasionally shock the pool. Sometimes the chlorine generator won't keep up with shocking. The other thing that's real important is to keep an eye on the stabilizer level to make sure you've got enough of what we call chlorine stabilizer in the water. That helps the cell last longer. And so if we don't have the stabilizer in the water, the cell has to work harder and it won't last as long. So we want to protect that. So you've got a couple of different, you can either do the Saltscapes or Mineral Springs to help complete the saltwater care. Go ahead, Tony. What are the questions we have?
Well, a couple. We'll start with the first one. This really kind of goes back to some of the previous content as well, but it says our water seems to dry people's skin out after about 20 to 30 minutes. Number one, what causes this and how do we fix it? Good questions.
Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, a lot of people are sensitive to their skin gets dried out. I would probably recommend, I would recommend putting Optimizer and the Pool Complete into the water. Those tend to make the water feel softer and silkier. The other thing would be important also is to make sure the pH is in balance. Sometimes if the pH is out of balance, either too high or too low, that can cause some skin irritation. So those would be a couple of my suggestions for that. What else, Tony?
The next question, should you put shock, back to the shock conversation, should you put the shock in a bucket with water, then put it in the pool? Also, I heard you should do it at night so it doesn't burn off.
Yeah, those are really a couple things that you can do as far as putting the shock in a bucket before you add it to the pool. That would be important with really one type of shock that we have in the store, the Burnout 73, especially if you have any kind of what we would call a bleachable pool, a vinyl or a fiberglass pool. You may want to pre-dissolve that before you put it into the pool. Or if you add it directly to the pool, make sure you brush behind it so that nothing lays on the bottom of the pool, because it is a pretty strong chlorine. And if any of that chlorine lays on the bottom of the pool for very long, it could bleach the pool. That's kind of the main reason we would ever pre-dissolve the product. One caution there, if you ever do pre-dissolve that product, make sure you always add it to water first. So you fill the bucket up with 2 or 3 gallons of water, then pour the burnout into the water, not the other way around. You don't put the burnout in the bucket and then put the garden hose on it. This is a fairly hazardous material and it needs to be added to water, not the other way, not the other way around. Um, his other question about adding at night, especially if you're using like the burnout product as your main shock treatment, I would typically recommend that adding it at night when the pool's not being used, because the chlorine level is going to be very high, that we're not going to want people in the pool with the chlorine that high. That's kind of why we recommend the Smart Shock, because it's not going to raise the chlorine level very high and you wouldn't have to worry about staying out of the pool. All right, let's continue on. We just got a couple of other things here. I don't know if any of you are using Soft Swim. This is another option because we talked about traditional chlorine, saltwater pools. This is just another option of pool care. It's called Soft Swim. Some people are actually allergic to chlorine. This is a totally non-chlorine, all liquid system. Um, Feels gentle. You know, the person that asked about skin getting dried out, this could be a possible option. A lot of people find that this system is a lot softer and gentler on the skin. It does have a specific pool, you might say, that we recommend this for. We typically recommend it for smaller pools under 25,000 gallons maximum. Typically vinyl pools or fiberglass pools that are less porous. And ideally, if it's a larger pool in that 15 to 25,000 gallon range, we prefer to have a sand filter. It does work well on smaller above ground pools as well, but this is definitely a good option if you are sensitive to chlorine. I would check with Tony and his team there on if this would be a good option for you, because there's no chlorine in this at all. There's still 3 products. You still have an algicide. It's called the Soft Swim A. You put that in every couple of weeks. There's an initial dose, and then you put a small maintenance dose in every couple of weeks. The Soft Swim B, that's the actual sanitizer. That's the product that takes the place of chlorine. The technical name, it's called a biguanide. It controls bacteria. It's EPA approved. Instead of maintaining 1 to 4 parts per million of chlorine, you maintain 30 to 50 parts per million of the Soft Swim B. You use a little bit different type of test strip to test the Soft Swim B level. And then you shock the pool. Instead of once a week, you shock it every 3 to 4 weeks with Soft Swim C. This is a gallon container. It's actually a very strong hydrogen peroxide. You shock the pool every 3 to 4 weeks. and we're actually trying to maintain a level of peroxide in the water 20 to 60 parts per million. That's the ideal level that we want to maintain. So pretty good system, especially if you've got a smaller in-ground or above-ground pool. This is definitely a consideration, especially if you've got some skin sensitivity to chlorine. Again, we kind of covered the 5 keys to pool care: good circulation, filtration, cleaning practices, testing on a regular basis, maintaining good water balance, and whichever pool care system you're on, just make sure you're doing all 3 steps: sanitizing, shocking, putting a preventative algicide in, and you'll have crystal clear water. I might let Tony touch on this a little bit. Just recently, especially with the situation we're in with COVID-19, where people can't get into the stores maybe quite as often. The Pool and Spa House does have online ordering available now with both pickup and local delivery. Maybe you can touch a little bit on that, Tony.
Yeah, and this has been a really interesting one, but it's been a great addition to what we've always traditionally done at our stores. And you know, very, very much perhaps all of you have already been into our stores and kind of seen how we've responded to the pandemic situation that we're all amongst and in. But this online ordering piece has been an addition for us this year, and it's really come at a great time. The minimum order for free delivery is $100, but you can also order things online and request them to be picked up at our local store. If you haven't been into our stores, ultimately we can, like I said, if you have a $100 order, we'll deliver it at no charge for local delivery. But even if you want to just say, hey, I'm going to want to come and pick it up, and I'll call you when I get to your store, and if you could bring it out to me, that would be great. So we can do that as well, curbside delivery. But you're always, welcome into our store as well. We've done a lot of things, from sanitizing and we're wearing masks and a variety of things that we're doing to keep everybody safe. This really is another way for you to conveniently shop with the Pool and Spa House. You can call us if you have any questions about that, but yeah, feel free to check that out as well.
Really, before we let you folks go, and we'll definitely be on if you have any other questions, but we're not really covering much on troubleshooting tonight. The thing I'd like to say, though, is if you run into trouble where you get kind of the 3 most common problems that we see in pools is cloudy water, algae, and maybe some discolorations from metals in the water, that type of thing. If you ever have any of those kind of issues, bring a water sample into the store. It's one of those things, the earlier we get on top of it, the easier it's going to be to fix and the less expensive it's going to be to fix. So when you start to see your pool turn maybe a little bit green, come into the store right away. A lot of times we can fix that with, maybe $20 worth of product. But if it gets to the swamp stage where you can't see the bottom, there's polywogs in the pool, then it's going to be a lot more expensive, and we want to help you avoid that, because it's going to take some time. It might be right before the 4th of July, and you've got a 4th of July party coming up, and it's Thursday, and the pool's a swamp. It's very unlikely that it's going to be cleared up by the weekend. So we want to help you with those kind of things. If the water starts to get a little bit cloudy, the sooner we get on that, the faster we can fix it and not have your pool down and have those summertime memories that we're all looking forward to. Tony, anything else? Any other questions?
A couple of things. Number one, we've had this come up on a variety of occasions in our stores, and people, who are dealing with algae problems or clarity problems, they ask, so how long is it going to take for us to turn this around? I have a big party coming up, or we're having relatives come over to try and keep the kids occupied and outdoors, enjoying the pool. And really the right answer is we don't know. And every pool can be different, can respond differently. So it's important to have an open perspective about that. We have a lot of solutions, and we really try to methodically think through what might be the root causes of the concerns that you might have with your pool. But at the end of the day, the time element is critical and important to that clearing process. So And it's important to have, again, a good, healthy perspective on that. One question too, and thank you for your questions tonight. It's helpful to kind of steer dialogue, and feel free to chime more so in with those questions. But here's one that I'll answer. Randy, I'll steal your thunder. How can we bring in a water sample into the store? Any special container needed is the question. And really, um, we typically say a pint. Get a little pint water bottle, empty water bottle, and bring your water. It does not matter. We don't need that much really, but at the end of the day, if you brought in a pint size amount, that's perfect. Ultimately, we will get you an official pool and spa house water bottle to take with you, so you've got a dedicated bottle to grab. But yeah, good question. Any other questions you might have? Feel free to chime in with those on the chat forum here. And if you think of something else after we end tonight, our stores, our 4 convenience stores are always answering the phone. So please call in. Yeah, I think that's it for the questions at this point. On behalf of the Pool and Spa House and Randy Darby, our BioGuard representative, I want to thank you for connecting with us tonight in this unique way. Hopefully it was informative, and hopefully you have gleaned at least small nuggets, if not bigger ones, from what Randy talked about tonight. Again, really scratching the surface, but covering the basic points, and all very critical and important to enjoying, as Randy said earlier, enjoying that summer fun. Randy, anything else?
I don't think so. Thank you, folks, very much for coming, and hope you have a great summer, and we finally get some decent weather where you can use the pool and enjoy it. So be safe and stay healthy. We appreciate you coming on tonight.
Randy, thank you for hosting. We appreciate it, and folks will hang on here for a little bit. If you want to chime in with questions, we'll hang out for a little bit and answer those as they might pop in. But have a great night, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Good.
Oh, you bet, Tony. Thanks.